Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today. I have Dr. Avi with me. He is going to help us dissect this erythritol study that all of us bros have been speculating about. Is it going to kill us? Is it not? I figured we should get somebody qualified in instead of the meathead scientist to figure this out for us, tell us what we should be worried about. What's going on, Dr. Avi?
Hey, how you doing? For those who don't know me, I'm Avi. I'm a doctor based in New York. For those who do know me but aren't aware, there's a little bit of shift in my channel toward more of the bodybuilding community, which is one of the reasons I found Big Paul over here. And
what's your channel?
YouTube.com/AviMD.
AviMD. All right, I'll have to give you a follow, man.
Yeah, for sure. So this erythritol study.
Yeah, it got everybody stirred up, man, including me.
Made a big
I like my Monster energy drinks.
This made a big splash in a lot of communities, not just the fitness community, not just the bodybuilding, health community everywhere. Everyone's going crazy. Everyone's saying, oh my gosh, linked to major adverse cardiovascular events. Is it going to kill us? Is it going to increase our risk of heart attacks? Is it going to increase our risk of stroke? Is it going to increase our risk of cardiomyopathies, etc.? My answer, and we'll get into why, and I'm going to get into detail from the study and from the background literature and what we know about erythritol. My answer is that there's nothing that this study adds to the literature that would give us reason to believe that this increases our risk any more than we had a reason to believe that increased our risk of major adverse cardiovascular events prior to the study being published. And we'll go over why.
I guess I freaked out because I'm telling you, man, on contest prep, people live off of this shit, man. I know I do. I was using it to sweeten everything to help with cravings.
Yeah, I imagine your appetite must not be in the best shape when you're.
No. We're in a Grayland dominant environment, man, where you're hungry. You dream about food, so yeah, you got to do something to help out with it. But I know a lot of people were pounding the crap out of this, and it's in, from what I understand, it's in most of the energy drinks and protein bars that people are eating. And my worry is that we already have increased clotting factors because of the stupid shit that we do in bodybuilding, that this might be enough to tip us over the edge. That was my worry. Yeah,
no, and it's not. It's understandable, especially given the increased baseline risk that bodybuilders go through, especially when they're also dehydrated.
PEDs,
yeah, especially with the PEDs. Especially if you start throwing diuretics on top of that, and then everything is going toward a direction of are you going to get a MACE? Are you going to get a major cardiovascular event? So totally understandable why someone would see a study like that and get concerned. It's concerning, especially with the media headlines and everything and how much they made a big deal of it. So I'm gonna go into the study. Let's go through the study and what they did and what they did not do.
I was just worried because of I don't know. I mean, you're already doing stupid shit on contest prep, and we're in a bad spot anyway. Yeah. And it seems like most of the people that are falling over or that are passing away now, it's during contest prep.
Yeah. So yes, 100%. Contest prep is one of the most dangerous times for a bodybuilder. It's one of the most stressful times on the body. But the relevant question there is it because of the erythritol that they're chugging? Is that adding things onto it?
I think it's more likely the tren and the diazide that's probably doing it. But probably. To me, I was just worried about adding a potential additional risk factor, because I think I saw the one doctor that did the study. He quote I paraphrase, but I think the quote I saw is that he said it was on par with some of the highest risk factors that he had seen.
Yeah. Now, so erythritol levels that's true, and that's important. So levels of erythritol in the blood are totally correlated with increased risk of major adverse cardiovascular events. Now, that doesn't mean that consuming erythritol, even if it results in an increase in levels of erythritol in the blood, is associated with an increase in major adverse cardiovascular events. There's a difference there. And that's what the study did and did not measure when they looked at the link between erythritol and major adverse cardiovascular events. What they did in those cohorts was that they measured erythritol blood levels. They didn't actually look at erythritol intake. It's a very important difference. So the reason why is that your body produces erythritol endogenously, naturally. How much erythritol it produces depends on your major adverse cardiovascular risk factors. Central adiposity, obesity, alongside with that, hypertriglyceridemia, hyperglycemia especially. And we'll go over why here. This is the pentose phosphate pathway. And so we can see D-glucose. So glucose actually ends up getting shunted into erythritol. If you follow the pathway down, erythritol is one of the purple compounds. This is the metabolism of glucose.
Okay.
And as glucose increases, this pathway ends up getting upregulated. So you have to do something with the glucose. And so either two things happen: the glucose builds up and you get hyperglycemia. That can't happen ad infinitum, so there has to be some sort of steady state. And so what happens is it gets shunted. And one of the pathways that gets shunted is through the pentose phosphate pathway. It gets broken down, and one of the byproducts of glucose breakdown is erythritol. There are other breakdown products as well. There's xylitol, there's arabinose, ribose, but one of the products is erythritol. And this is important because hyperglycemia, it's itself a risk factor for major adverse cardiovascular events.
Right.
And it's not a small difference in erythritol. That's the other thing. There's another paper I'll pull up here, looking at a cohort of young individuals, and what they found was that for if you look at increased central adiposity compared to stable adiposity, the erythritol level jumps from 4.12, these are in micromolars, to 60 micromolars. That's just for central adiposity. And what I really wanted to show you was the glycemia. In lower baseline glycemia, the erythritol level was 5.12. In higher baseline glycemia, the erythritol level was 105 micromolars. Now, micromolars. So, and by the way, the higher glycemia was defined as a hemoglobin A1C of greater than 5.05%. So that's not even diabetic level.
No.
It's actually not even pre-diabetes.
Yeah, pre-diabetes is 6, right? Yeah, somewhere around there.
5.7.
5.7.
5 point something around 5.6, 5.7. Diabetes is 5. So pre-diabetes for those, 5.7. 5.7 to 6.4 is the pre-diabetes level. 6.5 hemoglobin A1C and above is a diagnosis of diabetes. This is not even close to that. We're talking about over 5.05 compared to below 4.92. And that this is just how much of a difference endogenous erythritol production is happening. It's a huge difference just from that little bit of extra glycemia. And if we go through all these different risk factors that bump up your erythritol level, like increased adiposity, these are all the things that increase your risk of major adverse cardiovascular events in the first place. Now let's look at their cohort and see what their cohort had. So let me share this. Let's go back to the paper.
So yeah, man, if you're a diabetic, it's really concerning, right?
Yeah, no, if you're well, the thing is, if you're a diabetic, yes, it is really concerning. But the question is the reason it's concerning is because you have diabetes and that leads to major adverse cardiovascular events, or is the reason it's concerning is because you have diabetes and therefore you're going to have a lot of erythritol? And I think there's really no evidence it's because you have a lot of erythritol. I think what's just happening is that's a byproduct. And so it's really, go ahead.
It's the downstream effect of the natural glucose converting to the erythritol as a regulation system, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
but what's really
what you're
doing you in is not the erythritol that's getting hurt. What's doing you in is the fact that your glucose is out of control.
High glucose levels. Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the things doing. So, and if you look at the baseline characteristics, I'll zoom in on them over here. These are their cohorts that they used. Let's just look at their average BMI. They're almost at the point of obesity. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Look at the percent of diabetes. Over 20% in all the cohorts had diabetes. Not just hyperglycemia, not just pre-diabetes, but straight up diabetes. 70% or above had hypertension. Over 75%, so 70% or above, 69.3 in the European cohort, had already had a history of coronary artery disease. Around 30 to 40% had a history of myocardial infarctions. The LDLs are not that great. HDLs also not that great. Same thing for cholesterol and triglycerides. So this is a sick cohort. This is a cohort that is not healthy. They have all of the risk factors of cardiac disease, and they also have risk factors that increase erythritol. Things that increase erythritol, but also increase major adverse cardiovascular events.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the study initially was done on sick, supposed to be done on sick people to see what the underlying factors were of the illness, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it wasn't intentional, but the point here is just that.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. The point here is that because it was done on patients with people with all of these conditions, it poses a confounding effect, because now you have an issue. Now you have now you're measuring erythritol levels, but we know that erythritol levels are increased anyway from these factors that increase your risk of major adverse cardiovascular events in the first place. So it's kind of like the classic example of a confounder would be like ice cream being related to murder, right? Okay. Ice cream related to crime. It's like ice cream sales go up, crime goes up. And it's not because ice cream is causing crime to go up. It's just because ice cream sales there's a common factor there, which is the warm weather. So the warm weather causes ice cream sales to go up, and it also causes people to go outside and interact more. And when people go outside and interact more, they harm each other more.
Right. So we know correlation isn't always causation. Yeah.
And look, it's fine to look at correlations and speculative causations. That's and you say, okay, well, this warrants more work. The issue in this case is that we already have prior knowledge that there are confounding factors, that it's not just we're speculating confounders. We know there are confounders because we know that how erythritol is produced. We know that erythritol increases from hyperglycemia. We know that erythritol is increased with central adiposity. And we know that these things also independently cause major adverse cardiovascular events. So we have background knowledge. It's not like, okay, we found an association. Correlation is not causation. Maybe there's a confounding factor. No, it's more than that. We know there are confounding factors. We have background knowledge to know that erythritol specifically has these confounding factors.
That makes sense.
The other thing to note is the platelet aggregation study. Part of the they did various platelet aggregation studies. I want to mention a couple things. So the platelet aggregation studies have you heard of the evidence hierarchy?
Yes.
Yeah. Platelet aggregation studies are a mechanistic type of evidence. They are at the bottom of the evidence hierarchy, which means they carry the least amount of weight, and for good reason. There's been platelet aggregation studies on all sorts of things that have indicated increased clotting and have turned out to do absolutely nothing. In fact, there are some things that have turned out to decrease clotting, even though platelet aggregation studies have shown an increase in clotting. An example of this would be fish. So TMAO was a whole thing back in the day where they thought TMAO would increase major adverse cardiovascular events. And one of the lines of evidence for this was that they did platelet aggregation studies. And they look at it. They released this compound. And they did all various platelet aggregation studies, and they did all this. It showed all this compelling evidence, and it turns out when you eat things that have a whole bunch of TMAO, the highest concentration of TMAO, which are various fatty fish products, actually, if anything, there's a decrease in clotting factors. There's a decrease in clotting, and if anything, the observational data shows a decrease in major adverse cardiovascular events. So the first thing I'll say is to take the mechanistic data with a shovel of salt, because it very rarely pans out to outcomes. There's a very big difference between a petri dish and what goes on in your body. Complete night and day. The other thing is that even within the mechanistic studies, there were some issues. There was a lack of randomization, for one. Not all of the mechanistic studies had the best controls, but the main point here is that there's no good evidence that, to date, that consumption of erythritol is linked to major adverse cardiovascular events. And I want to also point here, like these concentrations after ingestion of 30 grams of erythritol, this spike and fall that you're seeing here, it's not crazy for someone to reach these levels just by having all of these risk factors. So so it's not like, well, the risk factors are going to get you over here to this, 45 or 100, but they're not going to get you higher than that. And erythritol consumption gets you way higher. That's not true. There's not any reason to believe that, because just even normal glycemic increases within the normal range can get you to 100, and that's just with one factor. There's other factors that stack another 10, factor of 10 on. There's and then just imagine if you go full diabetic range. So again, there's this underdetermination problem with erythritol, especially because they didn't measure the intake. The underdetermination problem is, well, you have all of these factors that we already know cause cardiovascular disease. All of these factors that cause cardiovascular disease are bumping up erythritol. Why isn't erythritol just this consequence of something that causes cardiovascular disease? And why do we have any reason to believe that it's causing anything? For that, you would want to look at something like erythritol consumption and adjust for the various cardiovascular risk factors. That would be the type of study you want to do, which is not the type of study that was done.
From what I understand, they sort of accidentally stumbled into the erythritol portion of it, right? They weren't even looking for it.
That's another problem, by the way. So there's a problem known as, have you heard the problem of multiple comparisons?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's so for the audience, when you do a whole bunch of hypothesis testing, you do an exploratory analysis and you look for a whole bunch of different things that might be linked to some outcome. Just as a consequence of doing all this different hypothesis testing, you're going to find something. Something's going to show up. Now, in this case, I don't think it's because of chance, although the problem of multiple comparisons is one of chance. But in this case, I really do think they stumbled on something. I just think they stumbled on a confounder because of our background knowledge of erythritol. That's all. So I don't see anything that this study is adding to the literature that's going to, that we really didn't already know. I mean, we already knew about erythritol and how it's part of the pentose phosphate pathway. We already knew it was linked to central adiposity. We already knew it was linked to increase glycemia. We already knew that increased glycemia and central adiposity increased risk of major adverse cardiovascular events. And we already knew that platelet aggregation studies don't pan out to outcomes many, many times. So I'm honestly at a loss to see what the study adds to the knowledge of the literature that gives me any reason to believe that erythritol is something that's an increased risk stacking on than I already would have thought before the study was published. I'm not moving the needle. There's nothing that's moving the needle for me pre-publication of the study from post-publication of the study.
So where do they go from here? Does this warrant further study?
I mean, it would ideally, sure. I mean, ideally, what you'd like to do is, instead of looking at erythritol levels, what you'd want to do is look at erythritol consumption, because that's what you're trying to, that's the exposure outcome relationship that you're trying to test in the first place. You're not trying to test levels versus outcome. You're trying to answer the question, well, if I'm on a contest prep and I want all this erythritol stuff to satiate, so I can have some type of appetite, or just for the average person consuming erythritol, is that going to make any difference? And what you're going to want to do then is adjust for these confounding factors. You're going to want to say, okay, comparing people who don't have higher adiposity, who have like lower than 4 hemoglobin A1C, compared to people who don't have who don't have high glycemia, compared to people who don't have central adiposity, compared to people who don't have all these baseline cardiovascular disease, or we find some way of adjusting for all that. We adjust all that out in the model, and then we see, okay, is there still a risk? Is there still a residual increased risk of major adverse cardiovascular disease? That's what you'd want to do.
I would assume that's probably their next step, right?
I have no idea what their next step is. I wouldn't assume that. I don't know. To do that is, they may not have that data, because like they used a cohort where they had data based on like blood collection levels, but they may not have done any dietary recalls at the time. They may not have done. I'm not sure that the group that did a study like that is equipped to do a nutrition-based, more nutrition-focused with dietary intakes or recalls. I don't know. They could be, but I'm not sure that they have any plans of doing that.
So basically what you're telling me is I freaked out over nothing. Maybe.
Well, okay, so in your defense, like I can understand why you freaked out. I'm not saying that you are crazy for freaking out. I get it. From putting myself in your shoes, if you're already doing, if you're already getting into, I don't know if you're kind of have any plans for contest prep coming up.
Yeah, later this year.
Later this year. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, then I totally understand. And especially if you're relying on erythritol for your appetite during that time, look, I get it. But yes, upon further analysis, upon a deeper analysis of the study, I don't see why you would have a reason to be any more afraid of erythritol from this study compared to before the study was published. I'm not sure what's being added that gives you good reason to be more afraid of erythritol than you already were before.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. It was weird, man. After I posted the video up the other day, I had a couple people reach out to me, and I'm sure it has no relation to it, but I had a couple people that said that they were drinking tons of energy drinks and ended up having clots. It's probably unrelated. It's probably other factors going on, but people want to blame it on, something else, but it's probably other things. But I did have multiple.
It's so interesting when that happens. It's like, if you look at what goes into an energy drink, there's like a whole bunch of different ingredients. There's a whole bunch of caffeine. There's a whole bunch of this, that, and and if you look at the people that take energy drinks, there's like a whole bunch of background things that they do that are that it's like, and then of all the things that they do, whether they're on PEDs or whether they're on diuretics or whether they're on anything, and whether they're chugging God knows how many milligrams of caffeine just to be able to function or get their workout in, they'll select this one compound in that whole laundry list.
Right.
Aha! That's what it was.
Yeah, it was that pushed me over the edge.
That's what did the clot. Got it.
Yeah, it was funny though. I did have multiple people reach out to me. Yeah, I know it's silly. I know it's silly, but I was a bit concerned though, because bottom line, these energy drinks and a lot of these protein bars are just full of trash anyway. It's probably not a good idea to be eating a ton of them and drinking a ton of Monster energy drinks anyway. But
well, just with the caffeine, caffeine limits alone. At some point you're going to go over 400, 500 milligrams of caffeine consumption a day.
Hell, that's just what's in a pre-workout now.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, so, and look, the relationship between that becomes detrimental at a point. Like your concentration, like the relationship between caffeine and concentration goes up and then goes down. Like at some point, you get not just diminishing returns, but you get a deleterious effect if you keep consuming more and more caffeine. So, I mean, look, I saw the portion of your video about whole foods and like, okay, erythritol's in like processed foods generally versus whole foods. Yeah, whole foods is a good general heuristic. There are some processed foods that are in certain contexts better than whole foods. One example for that is protein powder. So it's a good general heuristic. There are certain places, I'm sure there are certain places for some amount of processed foods, be it even the energy drinks. I mean, I don't have a problem taking an energy drink before a workout. I would have a problem slamming an energy drink every, 5 times a day to stay functional. Like if I ever get to that point, like stop me.
I've run into plenty of people that do it.
Okay.
I work in IT, man. These guys live off of cases of energy drinks. That's the standard in the IT world. Got to stay awake to code.
I mean, look, moderation is another good general heuristic.
Yep.
Heuristics all have exceptions, but generally speaking, the amount of here's the point. The main point is the amount of the average erythritol consumption in the United States. I don't really see a reason to be concerned with.
Okay.
That's the main.
Well, I'm going to celebrate by having a Monster Energy drink and a Quest bar after this.
Enjoy. All right. Awesome.
You're gonna help me sleep better. I did panic a little bit because I'll be honest, I've had people using it on contest prep to help with help them alleviate some of the hunger issues. I use it. I put it in stuff. I'll mix it in my oatmeal, things like that, to get rid of the sugar cravings or to help with them at least.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, at this point, I don't see. Look. There may be a study that comes out showing it's harmful in the future. There may be a study coming out that's showing it's beneficial in the future. At this point, there's a paucity of evidence that gives us much good reason to be swayed in either direction. It's just that this is another one of those studies that just doesn't give us a reason to be swayed in either direction.
Okay. I mean, I guess if you wanted to play it conservative, you could probably limit it. But otherwise, enjoy yourself.
You could do that with a lot of things, though. Like you could do. And I don't think erythritol would be the number one thing on the list to do that.
You mean trend might be up there?
I mean, exactly. There's as far as the hierarchy goes, there's a number of things you can pull out if you want to say, well, I'm doing this to be conservative.
I always laugh at bodybuilders. They'll freak out over crap like this, and then they're not worried about the bathtub trim that was made in Mexico. That's totally cool. That probably has heavy metals in it and all sorts of stuff.
God knows what. That's the point.
All right. Well, I think we'll all sleep better knowing all this. I really appreciate you coming on and clarifying some of this for you. Where can people find you online? I know you talked about your YouTube channel, but
sure. A number of places. So youtube.com/AviMD. I also have a Twitter you can find me on. So I am at AviBittmd. And that also will have a link tree with all my links. So I have a Discord community. I have an Instagram. You'll find it all over there. So link that you can do linktr.ee/AviBittmd. So I'll put
all of your stuff in the video description so people can connect with you. So I really appreciate you coming on and making me feel a little bit better. I'm sure the bodybuilding community will sleep a little better and go to Costco and get their case of Monster Energy drinks tomorrow.
Well, I'm happy we did something for him. I mean, sleep better.
Believe me, they need a lot of help, man.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, and if you wanna play it safe, there's things higher on the list than the erythritol.
All right, thank you, Avi. I appreciate you coming on.
For sure. All right, take care.
For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.